when you have a red light, right, we talked about the wavelength, right? So the other thing is, what else do you need to think about? Like power output and power per square centimeter, and how are those calibrated?
Exactly. So it gets rather complex when we discuss, the power output and the distance and the area that it's treating. And that's something we had to go through, obviously, when we started the business to first understand what all the scientific literature is talking about, and to understand the irradiance, the power or the intensity of the actual light coming out the device. But we've figured that out, and we've done all the testing. We've had our devices third-party lab tested in the UK, so we know for sure how much light intensity is coming out of the devices, and then we can plug those into the equations. The equations already exist, where you just kind of plug in how much power and how close to the body you are, and how much energy you want, and then it'll give you either a amount of time you need to be there, or like with scientific equations, you can mix the factors up to get the answer that you need. But with the power of our lights, the way they've been set up, treatment times range from 5 to 20 minutes, depending on what your ailment is and depending on the size of the light that you get. Because as we've kind of alluded to, like, you can get a small light where you can just shine it on your painful wrist, or you can get a light the size of a door where you can do your entire body from head to toe, in which case the time of the treatment, the distance away from the light source, all kind of plays into the equation.
Okay, so for dosing, you said, well, 5 to 10 minutes. So if I have one of those little lights, right, is that 5 to 10 minutes in each area, or is that just 5 and 10 minutes total? Does it have some kind of systemic effect that I would need to think about?
It's you don't need to think about it in terms of anything negative happening. If you got wrist pain in each wrist, and you do 5 to 10 minutes on that wrist and 5 to 10 minutes on that wrist, there's no negative side effects. You're not going to mess something else up in another part of your body, or further down the line. The scientific literature, obviously, it's ongoing, and we're always learning more and kind of understanding the finer details. But for example, I'll explain to you a little bit why it's blurry, because when they do meta-analysis of the red light therapy study, so some university will sit down and look through, there's about 5,000 studies on red light therapy at this point in time. So they'll look at those 5,000 studies, they'll pull out all the studies that are about pain, then they'll analyze them, and they'll say, well, the benefits seem to be in this range. And that range is quite large. So they will say something like energy accumulation of 10 joules to 50 joules, and everything in between has found to be beneficial. Mm-hmm. So what that's basically saying, why that happens is because one university does a study, and they say, oh, we used this tiny little red light, and we held it on the wrist for 10 minutes, and we got pain relief. So it shows that this power of light for this amount of time gives you pain relief. Then another study will say, oh no, but we used this massive one for much longer, for an accumulated energy of this total, and we also found pain relief. So that's why the range of what is actually shown to be beneficial is quite large. So when I say to a client, use it on your wrist for 5 to 10 minutes, well, that's, there's a big difference between 5 and 10 minutes, really. And people get confused. They say, well, is it 5 or is it 10? Like, which one? Because they're thinking about the amount of energy coming from the light. And people want to know, is there too much? And there is too much, but too much happens at about 8 hours of exposure. That's the latest bit of info that I've heard, coming out of the scientific literature. When they say you risk having too much energy if you were hypothetically to fall asleep with your light on and then stay asleep all night. And then you might, be overdosing on energy. But 5 minutes is enough to give you pain relief. So is 10 minutes. 10 minutes might give you a great result as well. So that's where we are right now.
So is it a direct relation between like power and time? Can you just trade one for the other, or are there any trade-offs or different benefits?
Yeah, no. So we're now starting to learn that, initially we thought that more power was better, but now we're learning that that's actually not the case. So it's more on the lower end of the power spectrum and slightly longer time, because there is a certain aspect of light kind of being processed and absorbed in the cells, which actually takes time. It's not, you couldn't get the world's most powerful light and absorb all your energy in 10 seconds. It's not going to work. But you could take a much lower powered light and absorb all the, spend 10-15 minutes, and that's a far more efficient way to absorb the light and get the benefits. So there is some borders to that question. You can't go too powerful, and you also can't go too long. You've actually got to find that Goldilocks zone where it's high enough power and long enough time to get those benefits. And as mentioned, with our products, at least, it's that 5 to 20 minute range, again, depending on what you're treating and what your goals are.
So we have talked about power in kind of in general terms. So, but if we and you talked about joules, but joules would be like the total, I guess the total dose. So if you were, I mean, so what units are we talking about for the power? Is it per like joules per square inch or something like that?
So the power of light is described as milliwatts per centimeter squared. So that's,
Right.
if you were to shine a light on your skin, you would in theory be able to calculate, the centimeter squared that light is falling onto, and then the amount of light, the intensity of the light coming out, which when you multiply the intensity of the light, which is milliwatts per centimeter squared, by the amount of time that you're exposed, taking into account the distance, you then get joules.
Right.
So that in the scientific literature, they most often are saying we used this product, which has a power of 30 milliwatts per centimeter squared for 10 minutes for a total of 60 joules of energy.
Right.
So those are the three factors to get that amount of energy in joules.
And one last scientific. So will the energy or the intensity decrease as the square of the distance? So would you I mean, if it's a handheld, would you want it as close as possible?
Yes. Again, with my products, I can't speak for other devices out there because everybody's got different parameters. But it's a balance between the depth of the goal that you're trying to achieve and the device you have. So a great example is that you can use our handheld devices for eye benefits, for eye health benefits, or you can use it for knee pain benefits. But it's totally different because for eye health, you need much, much, much lower power. So what that means is, correct, you have to create a greater light source and your eyes. Because as soon as the light, leaves the device, it starts to decrease in power, and then until it hits your body, it's reached a certain intensity of light. But if you're treating knee pain, you got to get into the bone, you got to get into the joints, you've got to get through the muscles, you've got to get through the skin. So you need more intensity. So you need to have the light much closer to the skin so that it's not losing its intensity as it travels through space.
Actually, talking about eyes, because I must admit, my first thought would be, I don't want to shine a bright red light into my eyes. So for eyes or other areas which have like special benefits or special concerns.
Yes. So it's very normal and it's very natural to think of, you shouldn't shine light into your eyes, and that's mostly true, I suppose, but it's more true from being uncomfortable. It's not comfortable to get bright light in your eyes, but there is a little bit of misplaced fear around red light therapy and eyes, And that's because, you know, in the early days, they were using lasers to produce red light therapy. And that's why you can still go to some physios where they have very expensive machines, and it's called cold laser. So it's, you know, little laser devices that they'll hold on your skin, which is a completely different beast. It has the same effect on the body, but it's I mean, it's lasers, and this is a very different type of light. It's what, you know, it's known as a coherent light. So if you think about a laser torch that you can, you know, shine on the side of your wall, and it's a pinpoint piece of light. So that's a laser. So it's far more intense, and that's what you have to avoid getting in your eye. You know, that's because it's such high power, that can be very, very damaging for the eye. But that fear has carried over into the new technology. And the new technology, which we've been talking about this whole time, is LED-based red light therapy. And that's non-coherent light. So LEDs just whoosh, they spread out like that, and there's no, you know, there's no pinpoint in terms of the dispersal of the light. And there's also no danger for the eyes. Obviously, you don't want to take our devices and stick them right on your face and stare into them, because it is very, very bright, very, very uncomfortable, and you could do some damage. But because we've made all the calculations and we've done the testing, we know that at arm's length away, that's exactly the power or the light intensity that has been stipulated in the scientific literature when it comes to red light and eyes. So while there is no danger associated with it if you use it according to our guidelines, any other sensitive areas of the body, the skin can be quite sensitive for some people. So what it does is it increases blood flow quite significantly, and that can manifest as a flushing of the skin. So people sometimes get a fright, or they get a shock when they do their first red light therapy treatment, and they appear to have all this. They think it's sunburn, you know. So they, oh my gosh, I got burnt by the light, but it's just the skin, the blood capillaries in the skin flushing with blood and getting all rosy. So there's no long-term damage there, of course. There can be there is some warnings about exposing the testicles to red light therapy, but the latest that I know about it is that red light has been shown to be very beneficial to sperm motility. And so they're extrapolating that it might therefore also be beneficial to testosterone production, because they kind of happen in the same place. Whereas the infrared light is a little bit unsure. It's not quite proven whether it's safe or damaging for the cells of the testicles. Further than that, there is no other. Actually, cancer is something that where it's not conclusive yet. We don't know what effects red light therapy will have on any cancer cells that might be in the body. A gentleman that I mentioned earlier called Michael Hamblin, and he was asked the same question on a podcast, and his exact statement was, "It's probably not a problem." So, you know, I just repeat what he says. But I also, you know, if someone contacts me and says, "Look, I've got cancer, can I use it?" I have to say, you know, you need to speak to your medical professional. You know, that it's not something I can advise on. But I will say that the NHS is actually looking into red light therapy as a treatment for pain caused by cancer treatments. So that's very exciting. But besides those things, there is no negative side effects known to man yet with red light therapy. And, you know, we're 5,000 studies deep and 6 decades in.
Excellent. So when is the best time to take red light therapy? Is it going to impact sleep if you have it late in the evening or something like that?
So that's a great question, and it's something that's actually not spoken about much besides myself, because I speak about it a lot. And what I try and teach people is that the best time to take red light therapy is, for most people, in the morning. And the reason for that is because the body has evolved to kind of exist within a circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm being the body clock that is primarily guided by light. So the only time in nature, if we were still hunter-gatherers, the only time in nature we see the reds and the oranges, that kind of light, that color of light, is of course sunrise and sunset. That's when we can look out over the beautiful horizon and see the sky turning those beautiful colors, and that's when we'll get red and orange light on our body. So it's my opinion, and I actually got to speak to Dr. Oh God, I don't want to get his name wrong. Dr. Panda, I believe his name is. He's a circadian specialist coming out of the States. And I got to speak to him about this, and he actually agreed with me that it's best to take red light therapy around the time that your body would be expecting sunrise. So if you were a hunter-gatherer, let's say you woke up at 7 a.m., you take your red light therapy, so you're getting this bright red light. So your eyes, your brain, and your skin know that it must be sunrise, because that's the only time in nature that you would see or experience red light. So you take your red light at sunrise, and then you immediately switch on the lights in the house. If it's still winter, you switch on the lights, you light up your environment, and that tells your brain, oh, it's absolutely daytime because I had the red of the sunrise and now it's bright light. Therefore, it's time to get the daytime hormones running. So that's my number one recommendation. My number two recommendation is then the other side of that coin, which is, of course, sunset. So ideally speaking, if you were concerned with circadian rhythm and optimizing your circadian rhythm, I would then suggest that you time your evening session or your sunset session to be roughly 3 to 4 hours before you actually intend to go to sleep. Actually, maybe even less than that, 2 to 3 hours, so that you've gone through your entire day. Your brain and your body knows absolutely that it's daytime because of all the light that's around. And then if you hit yourself with some red light therapy around sunset time, your brain goes, okay, this is the second time in this 24-hour cycle that I've seen and felt red light. Therefore, I calculate it must be sunset. Therefore, I am expecting, after the red light session in the evening, I'm expecting relative darkness and a fading light, because that's what would mimic the actual sun. So I say to people, if you choose to do red light therapy in the evening, make sure it's 2 to 3 hours before you intend to go to sleep. And also do your best to reduce artificial light as much as possible after your evening session, because we have to pay heed to the circadian rhythm. You get your red light and then you get fading light. So your brain knows for sure, okay, it's time to start preparing for sleep. The fading light triggers the melatonin production in the brain, and that's your sleep hormone that goes into your blood. And then by the time your head hits the pillow, your sleep processes are hopefully underway.
It sounds like you're using red light like every day. So whether you're recovering from exercise or not, so it's more, I guess it is like a supplement you just take on a daily basis. Is that kind of recommended? Is that the normal approach?
It's actually a little bit less than every day. So we do, as well as the industry in general, recommend, perhaps 4 or 5 days a week, because you do need to have some downtime, because what happens is there's kind of an accumulative benefit. So for 2 or 3 days, your body's accumulating all these benefits, and then you need to have a break so your body can just kind of relax down again and kind of integrate all the healing and all the extra work it's done, and then you do it again. There is a kind of unofficial risk of desensitizing yourself to the light. So what we actually recommend, although there's not massive scientific evidence either for or against it, we recommend 5 days a week with a day or two off in between, just to kind of let the body acclimatize. And then I personally don't use it every day. I use it very strategically, because I also take saunas. I also do cold therapy. So I'm of the opinion that it's not a good idea to do all of that together in one cluster. You know, I think there's a risk these days because everybody's getting into ice baths. You know, a lot of people are, you know, going to the sauna at the gym or having saunas at their house. So they want to wake up and do red light therapy, then jump in the sauna, then do an ice bath, then fast until lunchtime, you know, and that's, in my opinion, I think that's too much stress all at once, you know. So I like to pass them out. So if I'm not doing cold therapy, then I will do my red light therapy in the morning, then my strength training session, then my first meal of the day, and then I will kind of just let that, you know, ride out for a few hours. Or I will do a strength training session, then a sauna, then a hot shower, then my first meal of the day, and just let that ride out. Conversely, if I'm not strength training, I'm having a recovery day. If I plan on doing an ice plunge, then I will do the ice plunge in isolation of everything else. So I'll do my ice plunge, and then I'll just let my body naturally warm up, and then I'll, you know, eat my meals. I might have a sauna on the same day, but it'll be 6 to 8 hours after the ice plunge. I don't do them together.
Interesting. So one last question actually on red light that I should have asked before. Is there any evidence for it helping with hair, either in growth or retaining color?
Retaining color, I'm not too sure about, actually. I've never looked into that, but it's very, very good for hair growth. It makes existing hair grow for a longer period before falling out. It helps it grow longer than it would ordinarily. It also helps it grow thicker. So, you know, myself, I mean, I'm obviously experiencing a little bit of baldness on the top, but what I have noticed is that the hair that I do still have grows a lot thicker and a lot faster. And the little bit of hair that I do have on the top is also growing thicker and faster. And actually, it's getting a little bit darker now that you mention it. It is getting a little bit darker. I'm not sure that it will, you know, cause the hair to regrow where it had fallen out, but the hair that I do still have, it's absolutely makes a difference in the growth. And a lot of females who experience kind of female balding, red light is very, very helpful for them because, you know, it catches it before it gets too bad, and they do get their hair back.